Hi everyone, I'm Allison. Thanks for joining me for Where I'm From 71 with Natalie, who will be here in just a moment. What are you reading? I'm reading on my Kindle, which I don't often do. I'm wearing Tunics Now by Wendy Aarons on Growing Older, Better, and a Hell of a Lot Louder. And I expected to laugh because Wendy does a lot of online satire and humor, and so I have. But I also have been really touched by everything the book has to say about female friendships, which I was not anticipating. It has a lot to say about making friends with women in midlife and like kind of contradicting that whole idea as you get older, which has certainly not been my experience. And I loved having that reflected back at me in the book. So Natalie and I are doing the join dance. Here she is. But here she sort of is. Here she is.
Hello.
Hello.
How
You did
are
it.
you?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for asking.
Oh, good. You've been traveling all over. Are you currently traveling?
Yeah, we were just getting out of sodden Portland, my husband and I. So we drove, which I don't recommend, to Palm Springs. It was an 18-hour
Mhm.
hellish experience, but here we are, and the sun is out and the sky is blue.
The
So,
sun is out.
yeah.
I am not so far from you. It is beautiful.
Where are you?
And I'm in West LA.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah. And I lived in Seattle 1 year
Uh,
and I couldn't actually take it.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
it was very hard for my mental health.
February is terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
And
a
I
lot,
had moved from Chicago, so I thought, oh, I'll be fine. Chicago's like the worst.
but
And
there's blue sky. No, there's cloud. Yeah. Anyway,
so, would you like to just launch into it, or is there anything you'd like to say, or it's really your choice, reader's choice?
um, I am happy for you to be the guide and tell me what to do and what you would like. And I'm delighted to be here. I want to thank you for
Oh,
inviting me. It's really, really kind of you. I love your project. I'm delighted.
I'm delighted to have you here. I just, for other people's knowledge, I first became aware of not. Well, I read your book a while ago, but then I took your class, your Hedgebrook class, during COVID when Hedgebrook was like running a special, like pay what you can, and
Right.
I was still very deep in imposter syndrome at that point. So I was like, oh, great. I don't have to pay a lot.
And it
I,
was infinite. You could do it at your own time,
yes,
right? Uh-huh.
yes. But there was like a Slack element. So we could get on. We had like an hour where we could chat
Yeah.
with you. And I don't know if it was there on your Instagram that you invite, or maybe it was your newsletter, where you invited people to join you to do the Pomodoro
Uh-huh.
technique.
Early in
So
the
I
pandemic.
did that. Yeah. So I did that a couple times, which I found really fun and effective.
I'm so
Uh,
glad.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, the Pomodoro is there's different time frames, but the way that I do it is you gather together with community or you do it alone. But
Yeah.
it's nice when there's people doing it together like a quilting bee and write for 45 minutes quietly, heads bowed, getting the work done, and then take a 15-minute break and then come back and write again. I do it twice a week with a friend of mine, actually, Mondays and Thursdays every morning.
Yeah, it was very invigorating, and I somehow managed to get my children to do it with me, which would not be happening now, but it was COVID, and so it was so joyful. And how I got them to do it with me was I gave them the power to give me my prompt,
Oh,
and I
perfect.
said, "What do you want me to write about?"
Wow.
And they were like, "Oh, that story you tell about um, when that boy told you your forehead was big." Or that was one of them. And so I did.
Wow.
It was fun.
That is such a telling thing that they asked you to tell a story about your own resilience.
Yeah, they're really. I was a little historian too when I was a kid, and
Uh,
still, I mean, as you can tell from this project, I
right.
love to gather people's stories and intimacies, and they're a bit that way as well.
But they asked you to tell a story about you in a vulnerable moment and clearly resilient because here you are and sharing the story. I think that's lovely.
It was very cute because, and it was good because they were also like, that story makes me laugh. Because when I tell it to them, it's a funny story.
Mhm.
And I like to be reminded, like, I do use a lot of humor. And I think sometimes when I'm writing, I can be a little not as multi voice story, like kind of get stuck in one space. And it's always nice to be kind of nudged on the shoulder and say, hey, remember how that also made you laugh?
So you're talking about tone. Yeah.
Yes, that's a good word for it, Natalie.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Humor is a really good tool.
I
Although,
love it. It's a survival technique for
although
me.
sometimes it becomes a little passive aggressive
Oh, it can be for
in
sure.
the hands of my characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it was definitely in my family of origin.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was definitely a weapon,
Yeah.
not a tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's something I've become very aware of when I had children and realized, oh, they're young.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand and shouldn't understand sarcasm.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say something, they take it as true.
Right.
They're not taking it as, some other intention. So it's made me much more clear and deliberate about my words.
Well, it's a seventh grade. I'm going to say a seventh grade girl thing because in my experience, my children, it definitely was more for my daughter than my son. But I remember just being horrified by the things that the girls would say to one another, followed up with JK, LOL, as if that erased, JK, LOL was like the tagline that you could say something hideous and then supposedly erase the consequences of the words with, just kidding, LOL. And I didn't.
And did your
Go ahead.
and did your daughter struggle with like when everyone became so cruel? Because I did. I was like, was there a memo like that we all became this person? Because I thought we were all friends.
I struggled,
Yeah.
and I try not to speak for my kids
Right.
anymore.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I will speak for myself. I struggled a lot.
Yeah.
I was like, uh, weren't we all just like having sleepovers a minute
Yeah.
ago? Uh, when did it all get so ugly?
Speaking of that, I just finished Allegra Goodman's novel Sam,
Mm-hmm.
which is a deep, deep character study of a child. I think it began, when she was 3 through age 19 or 20. And Allegra Goodman does an excellent job of capturing that moment when suddenly everything changes.
So I'll read it.
Yeah.
That sounds fascinating. I love your book suggestions and your newsletter. I am always talking up your newsletter because I have
Thank you.
it's a really joyful read. And
I love this letter. It's so much.
I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
I I need to get into that space with my newsletter. I'm a little like, okay, I need to do this now. People have subscribed and I need to send them updates. But I appreciate your joie de vivre.
Thank you. It's so if you don't know, the newsletter is called Read, Write, Eat, and it comes out every 2 weeks or so. And in it, I have a little paragraph of introduction, very short, and then a book or two, a writing prompt or a writing teacher or a writing craft book, and then followed up with a recipe. And that's it. In, out, a little bit of joy in your box. Yeah. So check it out if you're interested.
And it seems like that seems like a great segue into your poem because you mentioned some of these things in your poem. So let's go.
So you ready?
Let's do it. Yes.
Okay. Pardon me. I am from a bottomless coffee cup, from cream and 2 sugars, from 13 apartments, cars repossessed in the night, from hollow core doors that barely thump when slammed. I'm from contradiction, dreams of matching dishes and peeing on the side of the freeway. From Penny Hart, famous silverware thief. From her checkbook that won't balance and cardboard boxes labeled miscellaneous. From Grandma's soft lap and lipsticked cigarette butts. From her matching belts and shoes and handbags. A standing wash and set appointment. From she's a keeper, and invite a friend. I'm from books and records, from Ella and Billy and Carol King, from Winnie the Pooh and Aesop and Steinbeck. I'm from Alphabet City, a fifth floor walk up with a bathtub in the kitchen. I'm from canned stew, government cheese, and Rice Krispies. From Carol Brady and Shirley Partridge, TV mothers who also raised me with their sack lunches, curfews, field trip chaperoning. From Martha Stewart and her terrifying perfectionism. From striving, striving, striving. I am from single women, from strength and gap-toothed photo albums, from grandma's cashmere sweater, bought with her first paycheck, folded with lavender in my drawer.
That was beautiful. I love it, and I relate to so. I love the doors that don't thump because they're not. That's such a great visceral detail. I mean, I love it all, but I relate. I was a big fan of Carol Brady, and I was just mentioning yesterday to a friend that when I had the honor of having lunch with Florence Henderson once, and I was so starstruck by her more than I have been by almost anyone because of that place that she held in my heart, and like wanting to thank her for that.
Mm-hmm. I bet those TV moms were, and even Alice, the maid on Great Guns, right? I bet those women that were caregivers and sort of provided safety for children, provided a kind of safety for those of us that maybe didn't have it in our home lives, in our natal families.
Yes.
And watching that was like learning a different way to be than what I was experiencing in my home.
Yes. And I think she, from my experience of her, totally leaned into that. I mean, did not feel like, okay, stop remembering me from Mrs. Brady. You know, like she wasn't one of those people. It was like that was part of her legacy, and she understood that. And that was part of what was so touching about it, to be honest. It was like, oh, I don't have to pretend like you aren't meaningful to me. Because, you know, like you do sometimes with people. Like, oh, yeah, I'm a fan of your work, whatever.
It's like, too, because she wasn't really a role model in the way some other people on TV that I watched as an adolescent and a young child were more role models. She was like somebody that I felt like I wanted to be under her wing.
Yeah, it was, and I grew up in a blended family. There were 5 of us, not 6, but yeah, so it was parts of it that I was so envious because I had 4 brothers. So I was like, oh, if only I had sisters, it would be so different. Look at this show. This is evidence. So what was the experience like writing this poem? You said you dashed it off in your email when you first sent it to me.
I did a couple of drafts, and it was hard to start, and coffee seemed to be a good place to begin when I landed on it. Because the adults in my world were all big drinkers, but also coffee drinkers. And it was, I just remember delivering coffee to adults in the morning in their bedroom, my grandma, my mom, we didn't all live together, but I remember doing that and sort of rousing the family, right? Whomever I happened to be with. And then I've been working on 2 projects. One is a memoir that I'm working on right now called Go Back to Sleep. And the other is a collection of linked stories. And so I think about the experience of my characters and my experiences. And when I added it up, we lived in 13 apartments and I went to 6 elementary schools. And so I was, as I always try to add concrete details to make things come to life, I started thinking about those. And like you said, the hollow core doors. I like that too, because that slammed also expresses anger that there was a lot of in my home. So I enjoyed writing this a lot. I enjoyed thinking about my grandmother and thinking about my mother and thinking about, on the one hand, Carol Brady, who felt like, some sort of safety to aspire to. And then I do not kid when I say that Martha Stewart ruined my life. I feel like her perfectionism just made me not appreciate things in my 20s because I felt like I had to strive so hard to try to, set a beautiful table and make a dinner party and all of the things that I wish I could have relaxed into in a better way. Mm-hmm.
I think you've mentioned that in your newsletter
I
because
have.
that felt familiar to me. I was
Yeah.
like, I know this one. And then, so is that the belt, handbag, shoe matching, or is that just the time? Because I do also remember that.
So my mother and grandmother were very different people. And so let me find that line here. So I'm from contradiction, dreams of matching dishes. And that is kind of like what I aspired to with and Martha Stewart, whatever. And my mother, pulling over to pee on the side of the freeway all
I
the
did
time.
a lot of that as well.
And my mother
Yeah.
was Penny Hart. And when I was little, we would go to a restaurant and she would put silverware in her handbags. We would have silverware at home and salt peppers and the checkbook that wouldn't balance. And we moved so much, and cardboard boxes were always. And then my grandmother was a bit of a respite with her matching belts and bags, standing appointment, and
we
grandma.
had the standing appointment that took me back to that's more my husband's grandmother, but
Yeah,
till she died.
Yeah,
standing appointment.
Yeah, and she's here and invite a friend were always the things that grandma would say. She's me and invite a friend, so I would have fun. Yeah.
That is such a sweet phrase. My mom often encouraged me to invite a friend so I wouldn't be alone and, with the experience, that I could share the experience with a peer.
Right.
And it's different when you have a friend there. So that was so sweet.
It reminds me of a line Ross Gay once said. I think it was Ross Gay. I may have it wrong, but somebody talked about, like, I have to hold up the phone. Somebody talked about, pretend I'm driving a car and I have to slam brakes and like throw my hand out, even though whoever is safety belted or whatever, as the truest gesture of love. Just throwing your hand out like that. And saying invite a friend, I think, is like that too. It's a real gesture of love.
It is too, and I think it's a real opening the circle. There's no like covetousness or concern that there isn't enough of whatever it is. Yeah. Which is, I think,
there's room at the table.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lovely sentiment. So I'm glad you enjoyed the prompt. It has helped, I think, my writing so much. Writing the poems and then listening to these every week. Like, we all know we need to be specific in our writing, but this prompt gives you no choice. And I love that. I love it for that.
Yeah. So I talk about with my students the ladder of abstraction, and that in order to say the lofty things, you have to say the things at the base of the ladder, the concrete things that make it all come to life. So then you can make the extrapolation, like invite a friend, as opening the circle, having plenty of love at the table. But you need to have the concrete words to make it more real.
That's so well put. That's really well put, because you do want all of those things, like the ladder. I mean, you can't just have abstraction. You can't just have details, because otherwise it's a laundry list or your like wish list for the future or something.
Right.
One
of my students always says, and I love learning from my students, one of my students always says, tell the story, have a thought. And so you figure the story is that concrete, telling the specificity, and then having the thought is that abstraction that is the generality that everybody's like, whoa, I feel that. I know that.
Which is such a good feeling when you're reading. I mean, that's I think the main reason I read is to have someone make their unique experiences universal, and then I kind of can hold on to that little bit too and help myself understand myself better.
Right.
Like, me too.
You feel recognized when you
Yeah.
read, right? Which brings
Yeah.
me back to Carol Brady, weirdly, because I was home alone after school, because I was an only child with a single mom.
Right.
So home alone and after school, and I felt recognized by what Carol Brady had to offer. Isn't that weird how Carol Brady is like the icon of this conversation?
I think it's very sweet.
She had a terrible haircut.
It was the time. I feel like hers was better than, was it than Partridge, or because I think hers was also terrible, was it not?
Probably. I don't remember.
The time was, I'm a little bit young for the Partridge
Yeah.
Family. Like they were just kind of leaving in their big old bus. But yeah, the Brady's and yeah, I even sort of had a staircase like that. It's funny too, thinking, it's funny you brought it up again, because I definitely did have that same experience with that show that I do with reading, where it was like, oh, that's like my life. That's like my life. Maybe this too could be like my life. You know, like I can bring this in too. This sort of managed chaos. It doesn't need to be chaos. It can be sort of like, we know at the end everything's going to work out. That was what was so sexy about the Brady Bunch to me.
So to maybe elevate it above Carol Brady, there's a quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald that talks exactly about this. And he says that that is part of the beauty of literature. You discover that your longings are universal longings, that you're not lonely and isolated from anyone, that you belong. And that's what we're talking about. You know, we if we're lucky, we bring to life a lot on, you know, on the page, and then our readers can feel recognized, and we as readers feel recognized in our own longings, and that's such a beautiful thing.
That is a beautiful thing. I'm just trying not to tear up, because that's it, right? That's what keeps us going. For me, I'll speak for myself. That's what keeps me going every day. You know, why you don't end up in a room in a closet alone.
Go with the closet is okay. 15 minutes time out, go for it.
Yeah, but it's that sharing it with someone, like, oh, okay, it's not just me feeling like this. So yeah, well, I don't know if there's really any better wrap up than that, Natalie, but if there's anything else you want to say,
I'm just grateful to you for all that you do, for bringing people together. I'm grateful. I don't know who's here, but if you're here, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And I'm a big fan, Allison. I wish you the very best, and I'm so glad you've shed your imposter syndrome.
Thank you. I've made a lot of progress, and I'm patting myself on the back. But it's a process. But I also very much admire you, and I thank you for all the gifts you have given me, because you really have, and it's such a thrill to sit down and talk with you. So thank you.
Thank you for the invitation, and you take good care.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.